I've been in Japan now for about 5 years, and as somebody who loves playing retro video games, over the time that I've been here I've actually found some really good bargains, and in this little mini series I want to cover some of the most fantastic bargains that I've found for my collection. I've kind of hesitated to make this series. I've made a number of attempts in the past, but I didn't want it to come across like I was gloating or trying to show off in any real way. I just really love this stuff, and it's nice to be able to share some of the things that I really care about. And anyway, the format of these videos is going to be me talking about what the item is, a little bit of the background of why and where I found it, and then basically demonstrating what it is, like whether it's a game or a piece of hardware or a accessory for a piece of hardware, and then talk about how much I actually paid for the item as well. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's the first of maybe what will be about 10 episodes in total. So without further ado, I'm going to crack on. So there are 3 systems in the main that I buy video games for. So the 3 systems are Super Famicom, the PlayStation, the original one, which you might just be able to see behind me, is Super Famicom boxed Tetris games, and the third system is the Game Boy. Now in the main, for the Game Boy, I only collect loose cartridges. Box software is very hard to come by, and also it's extremely expensive, and I really only care about the games. So I was looking for a copy of Tetris. What's so special about that, you might ask? So about 4 years ago in Akita City, I found myself a lovely boxed copy of Tetris. It's one of the few boxed Game Boy games that I actually looked out for. But in the main, as I say, I only buy loose cartridges. But I also picked up a second copy for about 300 yen, just loose as I say, because the 2-player link-up capability with the game is really great fun. So if you get the chance to play 2-player Tetris on the Game Boy, I'd really recommend it. But there is another version of Tetris that was only released here in Japan that the rest of the world didn't get. It's ostensibly exactly the same game, released by Nintendo. It was basically developed by Bulletproof Software. So what's different about it? Well, some of you may already know this, but there are reputed to be about 25,000 copies of the very early version 1.0, or the Minuet version, and very quickly replaced with the version that we all know and love. So what's different about it? Well, the clue is in its name. The first version actually contains a number of small bugs which can actually interfere with the gameplay, but most notably, it actually has a different version of the Type A music. So the Type A music is basically what Tetris on the Game Boy is probably most famous for, because it's such a catchy tune. But the very first version of Tetris that was released over here contains a minuet. Completely different. So I've been looking out over the last 5 years or so for a copy of this so-called Minuet version, but there was no way I was going to pay the prices that some people asked for it. I was actually quite surprised when I watched Elliot Cole's The Retro Future channel that some people are willing to pay upwards of £50 for a copy of the so-called Minuet version, and I went onto ebay.co.uk, and sure enough, not only did I find copies for sale for that price, but also sold copies for that price, and we're talking about loose games as well. So that was way out of my budget by about, let's say 50 times over the budget that I was looking to pay. So that's why it's taken me quite a long time to find this version. So how did I find it? Well, about 2 weeks ago I was coming back from Nagoya City, and it wasn't too late, and the weather has since cooled down over the very hot summer that we've had. And I thought, well, I feel as if I've got enough energy to not only just drive home, which was about an hour and a half away, but also to take a look at a Suragaya store, which I recently discovered in Kawana City in Mie Prefecture, where I live. So in the main, I was looking at PlayStation stuff because I had noticed on my very brief visit the previous time that they had a really healthy supply of PlayStation software. And I was mostly looking at the bargain stuff. I managed to pick up a copy of V-Rally for the original PlayStation, which I wanted for a future video that I'm going to produce. And then I thought, oh, they've got some, sort of junk or outlet Game Boy software as well. And then I remembered, I thought, oh yeah, I have been very lazily on and off looking for this so-called Minuet version of Tetris. And I knew a couple of the telltale signs to look out for. On the label, the Made in Japan writing is perfectly lined up with the grid lines of the design behind the text, and also the spire of St Basil's Cathedral punctures perfectly between the two L's on all rights reserved on the label. So I looked at this copy and sure enough, those two signs checked out, and I couldn't believe it because I've looked at a lot of copies of Tetris and never once found one, obviously, because otherwise I'd have made this video a long time ago. And I thought, I think this could be it. So I bought it because it was at a really good price, 220 yen including tax, because I thought, what have I got to lose? If it isn't a Minuet version, well, it's still a pretty cheap price for Tetris. So I took it home and I made dinner and I thought, okay, I've eaten now, let's check this game out. So I plugged it into my trusty Game Boy Pocket here because it's got a nice backlit screen and all was normal to start with. And then press start on the Tetris splash screen and sure enough, up popped up the Minuet music. It was the version that I've spent 5 years looking for. So yeah, otherwise it plays mostly identically apart from the Type A music. So yeah, that was a really great bargain. Really glad to have it in my collection and glad that I didn't actually pay that much for it. So unlike in North America where Tetris came packed in with the Game Boy from launch, Tetris was not actually a launch game here in Japan. The Game Boy was launched here in Japan on April 21st, 1989, but Tetris was actually released on June 14th, 1989, so a couple of months later almost. It basically retailed at the same prices as the other software that was released at launch, such as Baseball, Yakuman and Super Mario Land, for example, 2,600 yen including tax. So looking at the Game Boy Perfect catalogue, I'm going to add subtitles for what this all means, but it says Ochimono Puzzle no Genso Toyeru Game de Sekai Juu de Daiju Hitto Shita Domei Title no 移植版携帯してプレイできることとゲームボーイ版で初めて対戦プレイが可能となったことなどから So basically that's saying that obviously this was a worldwide hit and basically this is the first Game Boy game that was released with the capability for two-player link-up, head-to-head play. It then goes on to say, 国内出荷本数約424万本のゲームボーイソフト単体の歴史売上1位記録. So it was the number one seller overall for the Game Boy here in Japan. ハードの普及に大きく貢献した. Basically, this title was very much responsible for the spread and popularization of the Game Boy, and then goes on to comment that 初期バージョンと後期バージョンでは違う BGM が収録されている. So it does actually note that the very earliest version actually has different background music to the most common version, the later version. So it's interesting that the guide actually picks up on the fact that the Minuet version exists. Anyway, that's all for this one. I hope you've enjoyed this video and I look forward to catching up with you with another bargain very soon. Take care folks, bye bye.
Ah! No.